Think back to when you were a kid. You're probably asking questions all the time, right? Why is the sky blue? How do plants grow? Well, we're all kind of born that way, just naturally curious. And that drive, that need to understand how things work, that's really the heart of science. So today, let's dive into that incredible world together. I mean, have you ever just looked up at the night sky and gotten completely lost, wondering what in the world keeps those stars burning so bright? Or maybe you've looked really close at a flower and thought, how does it know when it's time to bloom? It's those little moments, right? That feeling of pure wonder, that's where discovery really begins. And that is what science is all about. Seriously, it's not some dusty old textbook sitting on a shelf. Think of it more like a passport to an adventure that literally never ends. We get to be the explorers, you and me, mapping out the unknown and figuring out all the cool, intricate ways our world works. And this adventure, it takes us to some absolutely mind-blowing places. I mean, science lets us wrap our heads around the huge, powerful forces that created our planet. We can go from studying the tiny secrets hidden in just one grain of sand, all the way to understanding the ancient story of how these giant mountains came to be. And our journey doesn't stop there. We also head into some of the most extreme places on Earth. We go into the driest deserts, all because we're asking this one big question. How on earth can life not just survive out here, but actually thrive? It's amazing when you think about it. And then we dive down, way down, into the deep, dark mysteries of the ocean. So you see the pattern here, right? The point is pretty simple. Science is absolutely everywhere. From the crazy pressure at the bottom of the sea to the total silence of outer space. There's just a whole universe of things waiting to be discovered. Okay, so we've established that science is this huge, awesome adventure. But what is it really, like, at its core? Let's peel back the layers a bit and look at the mindset that makes this whole thing possible. And here it is. This is the big idea. Science isn't just a big pile of facts you have to memorize. No way. It's an active process. It's a way of thinking, a way of looking at things, and a way of, well, doing things to understand the world. It's basically our best tool for figuring out all the secrets of the universe. Here's a great way to think about it. Science is like a giant jigsaw puzzle that never, ever ends. Every single discovery is like finding a new piece and snapping it into place. But here's the really cool part. Every piece you connect actually gives you a clue about the next piece you need to look for. It's a puzzle that just keeps getting bigger and more interesting. So that's a great question, right? How do we actually find all these puzzle pieces? Well, it turns out science has this awesome toolkit for just that. It's a step-by-step way to find answers, and we call it the scientific method. And this is basically how that toolkit works. It's super logical. First, you just notice something. You observe it. That makes you wonder, so you ask a question. Then you make a good guess about what the answer might be. After that, and this part is key, you have to test your guess. And finally, you look at your results and analyze what you found. It just goes around and around. It's a really powerful loop. Okay, but here's what I think is the coolest part of this whole thing. This method, it's not just for people in labs wearing white coats. Nope. You already use this every single day, and you probably don't even realize you're doing it. Just think about this for a second. Let's say you're writing something down, and bam, your pen just stops working. What do? What's the very first thing that pops into your head? I bet your first guess is, oh, it's out of ink, right? Well, that's your guess, your hypothesis. And your test is super simple. You unscrew the pen to check the little ink tube. And just like that, you've used the scientific method. You observed, you guessed, you tested. See, you're a natural-born scientist. And once you start looking for it, you'll see this kind of scientific thinking happening everywhere. A bike mechanic trying to find that tiny little leak in a tire, a cook in the kitchen wondering why the dal spilled over, an electrician trying to figure out why a light bulb won't turn on. They're all using that same exact logical process to solve a problem. So what's the one thing that kicks this whole process off? What's the key that unlocks everything? Well, it all goes back to that first spark of curiosity, the engine behind every single discovery. From fixing a pen to discovering a new planet is just one simple, powerful question. Why? When you get right down to it, science is really all about joyful exploration. It's about that shared feeling of wonder. Looking up at the universe with other people and working together to figure out its incredible story, piece by piece. The world is just packed with amazing things that are waiting to be figured out. It's like a giant treasure chest of mysteries. So my challenge to you is this. Never stop exploring. Always keep asking questions, and whatever you do, don't ever lose that sense of wonder. And I want to leave you with this one last thought, because it sums it up perfectly. After all, to be a wise person, you must be a wise person. Pretty clever, right? So, what are you going to ask why about today? You know, it's funny. Have you ever just stopped and really looked at the world around you? I mean, not just a quick glance, but a real deep look at the incredible variety of life that's so often hiding in plain sight. Well, today, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to rediscover the living world together. Okay, so let's imagine you're right here with us, part of this group. We're all heading out on a nature walk. But hey, this isn't just about getting some fresh air. Nope. We're kind of on a mission here. A mission to uncover the secrets behind what makes our planet so vibrant and absolutely teeming with life. So, as we take our first few steps, what do you notice? Come on, take a deep breath. Can you smell that? The damp earth, maybe some flowers. And now, just listen. It's not actually quiet, is it? The world is literally buzzing and chirping with life. I mean, just think about that for a second. It sounds like such a simple observation, but it's actually kind of profound, right? We don't just hear birdsong. What we're actually hearing is a whole chorus of unique individual voices. And that simple idea right there, that is the very essence of diversity. Okay, so it's one thing to just walk through nature, but it is a whole other thing to truly see it. And this is where we make a shift. We're going from being just passive onlookers to active observers. We're about to learn the art of noticing, which, by the way, is the absolute first step to thinking like a scientist. So I'm going to ask you directly, what does it actually mean to observe something? It's way more than just a quick look, right? It's all about deep curiosity, about really paying attention to the little details, the differences, and all the patterns that only start to show up when you look really, really closely. And this is exactly how we turn that casual noticing into actual science. We record what we see. It's not just grass anymore, is it? It's a plant with a soft and thin stem. And look at Tulsi. It's got a hard and thin one. See? By systematically capturing all these little details, we're basically creating a map of the living world. And that map is absolutely crucial if we want to understand it. Okay, check this out. On the one side, you've got simple grass, and on the other, a complex and vibrant hibiscus flower. Sure, they're both plants, but just look at how different their solutions are to the basic challenge of just living. This is the kind of incredible variety that careful observation brings to light. So all this amazing variety we've been talking about, the different bird chirps, the different plant stems, all those leaf shapes, well, it all has a proper scientific name. So let's get a clear definition of what that is. Biodiversity. It sounds like a big word, but it's actually for a beautifully simple idea. It's just the sum total of all the different kinds of plants and animals you can find in one particular place. I mean, from the tiniest little ant to the tallest tree, it all counts. It all adds up to the biodiversity of a region. Okay, so that's what it is. But let's ask probably the most important question of all. Why does this variety even matter? I mean, really, why should we care? Does it make a difference if there are 10 types of butterflies or 100? Why is all this variety so darn important? It's because everything, and I mean everything, is connected. You see a tree, but it's not just a plant. It's a home for birds, it's a supermarket for squirrels, and in return, when those animals travel around, they're spreading the tree's seeds, helping new trees grow. Every single thread is connected to every other thread, and having more biodiversity just makes that entire web of life stronger and way more resilient. Okay, but with millions and millions of different species on our planet, all this incredible biodiversity also creates a huge challenge, right? I mean, how do you even begin to make sense of it all? How could we possibly study it? Well, the answer is something called classification. Think about it this way. How would you arrange your books in your school bag, or even just on a bookshelf? You wouldn't just toss them in randomly, right? Of course not. You group them, maybe by subject, by author, whatever works. We instinctively try to create order out of chaos. And that exact same logic, that's what scientists use. The whole basis of classification is just looking for similarities to group things together, and then looking for differences to separate them out. It's a really simple process, but it allows us to see all these hidden relationships and understand the big picture. And here's the real payoff. This whole grouping thing just makes it so much easier to understand and study plants and animals. It's not about making boring lists. Not at all. It's about creating a really powerful framework for all this knowledge. Okay, let's dive into a really clear, practical example so you can see how this works. We can take all that amazing plant diversity we've been seeing and start to organize it using a simple but super effective system, grouping them into herbs, shrubs, and trees. And here are the rules. They're actually pretty simple. We can classify most plants just by looking at two things: their height and the nature of their stem. So, is it short with a green, tender stem? It's probably an herb. Is it medium-sized with a bunch of brown, hard, thin stems? That's a shrub. And if it's tall with a big, thick, hard trunk, yep, you've got yourself a tree. See? Simple, right? So let's take our first example, Tulsi. Let's run it through our little checklist. Is it short? Yup. Is the stem green and tender, not really woody? Yes again. So boom, it's a classic herb. All right, next up, let's look at a shrub, the hibiscus. It's definitely taller, and you can see the stems are hard and woody, but here's the key difference to look for. See how the branches start growing really close to the ground? They don't come from a single main trunk way up high. That's what makes it a shrub. And finally, we have the mighty tree. Just picture a big mango tree in your head. It's tall, right? It's got that one single thick, hard, woody trunk. And unlike the shrub we just saw, its branches start way higher up, reaching for the sky. That distinct structure is exactly what defines a tree. So there you have it. We've gone from just a simple walk to understanding the basics of scientific classification. And this brings us to the final and maybe most crucial point. The next time you walk outside, I want you to ask yourself this question: what have I overlooked in my own neighborhood? Because that diverse, incredible living world, it's right there. It's just waiting for you to really see it. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into what it really means to eat healthy. And it's probably not what you're thinking. We're going to go way beyond just counting calories to uncover the amazing story that's hidden in every single meal. Let's get into it. All right, let's kick things off with a little bit of ancient wisdom. It's a super simple but really profound idea that has been the foundation of healthy living for centuries. You know, this really makes you think, doesn't it? It kind of challenges our whole modern way of looking at food. It's not just what we eat, but it's how, when, and where. It's almost like a call for mindfulness with our food, something we often lose in our crazy, fast-paced lives. So, we're going to follow these two, Madhu and Mishti, on their journey of discovery. It all starts when they stumble upon this powerful Sanskrit saying, Anena jatani jivanti. It basically means food gives life to all living things. And that simple truth, that's the bedrock for everything we're going to talk about today. Okay, so if food gives life, that brings up a pretty big question, right? Why is the food we eat so incredibly different depending on where you are in the world? Why don't we all just eat the same things? To figure this out, let's take a look at India. I mean, it's the perfect case study with such an unbelievable variety of food. It's a great way to see just how much our culture and geography really shape what's on our plates. Okay, now this is super interesting. You can draw a direct line from what grows out of the ground to what lands on the dinner plate. In Punjab, maize grows really well, so what do you get? The famous makki di roti. Down in Karnataka, there's a ton of rice and ragi, which gives us amazing dishes like dosa and ragi mude. It's a perfect example of people eating what the land provides. So what this all boils down to is that our traditional foods are basically a story about the land we live on. These recipes weren't just invented out of thin air, they literally grew out of the soil, shaped by the local climate and what would actually grow there. But it's not just about the what, is it? It's also about the how. The journey our food takes from being a raw ingredient to a finished meal has been completely, and I mean completely, transformed over time. Wow, just look at the difference here. We've gone from the earthy, smoky heat of a traditional chula, which is a really slow, deliberate way to cook, to the instant, super-controlled flame of a modern gas stove. And that's not just a change in tech, it's a huge change in our whole relationship with the act of cooking. And it doesn't stop there. Think about this. That really tough physical job of grinding spices on a stone grinder has been replaced by the zip of an electric one. This revolution in our kitchens has saved us so much time, and it's totally changed the rhythm and feel of how we cook. All right, let's catch up with Madhu and Mishti. They're at this bustling food festival, and this is where things get a little scientific. They're about to figure out the why behind eating. So we're going from the kitchen to the lab, in a way, to see what's actually in our food. So at the festival, they learn that every single thing, from a simple piece of fruit to a really complex dish, is packed with these vital little things called nutrients. You can think of them as the tiny but super powerful building blocks for our health. Okay, to make sense of all this, we can basically group all these nutrients into three main teams based on the really important jobs they do inside our bodies. First up, the energy givers. I mean, the name says it all, right? These are your carbohydrates and fats, and they are literally the fuel for your body's engine. They keep us going all day long. So when you think of carbs, from things like rice and potatoes, think quick energy. You know, there's a reason you see marathon runners sipping on glucose drinks. They need that instant fuel to keep on running. All right, next up, the bodybuilders. You've probably heard of them as proteins, and you can seriously think of them as the construction crew for your body. They're constantly building and repairing everything from your muscles to your skin. They're absolutely crucial for growing kids and athletes. And the best part? You can get these bodybuilders from so many different places. It doesn't matter if you're all about plant-based power from lentils and beans, or if you prefer animal sources like eggs and fish. There are tons of delicious ways to build a strong, healthy body. Okay, so we've got our fuel and we've got our construction crew. Now let's meet the third team of nutrients. Think of them as your body's own personal security detail. They might be small, but their job is huge. Now these are the protectors, vitamins and minerals. And what's wild is that you only need them in tiny amounts, but man, are they important. They're the unsung heroes that fight off sickness and keep all our body's systems running smoothly. And you can really see what happens when they're not around. For centuries, sailors on long voyages would get this awful disease called scurvy, and it was all just because they weren't getting enough vitamin C. In other places, a lack of iodine can cause goiter. It just shows how critical these tiny nutrients really are. It's pretty amazing, really. Each of these tiny guardians has a very specific mission. If you don't get enough vitamin A, your eyesight suffers. If you're short on iron, you can feel weak and out of breath. It really proves that when it comes to our health, these small nutrients have a mighty impact. Okay, so to complete the whole picture of a healthy diet, there are two final crucial pieces to the puzzle. They're not exactly nutrients in the same way as the others, but our bodies just can't function without them. Now, these two are interesting. Dietary fiber and water don't really give you energy or build muscle, but they are absolutely essential. Think of them as the maintenance crew for your body. Fiber, or roughage, keeps your digestive system running smoothly, and water, well, water's involved in almost everything your body does. Never underestimate them. So, what's the big takeaway here? The next time you sit down to eat, just take a second. Realize that your plate is telling a story. It's a story of geography, a story of technology, and a story of science. So the real question is, what story are you going to tell? Have you ever stopped to think about that invisible force? You know, the one that snaps your fridge door shut or guides a ship across a huge, empty ocean? Well, today, we're going to uncover the secrets of magnets, a power that shapes our world in ways you might not even realize. So our whole journey into magnetism actually starts with a bit of a creative challenge. This is Reshma, and she wants to write a really special story for her grandmother's 60th birthday. She's dreaming up this tale from way back in the day. A ship filled with spices, gets caught in just a terrifying storm. The waves are crashing, the sky is pitch black. I mean, no stars, no moon, absolutely nothing to guide the sailors. They are completely and utterly lost. And this left Reshma with a huge problem. How could her sailors possibly find their way in the middle of all that chaos and darkness? Seriously, how do you move forward when you have no idea which way is which? To figure out this dilemma for her sailors, Reshma started doing some research, and that's when she found it, the answer, a pretty remarkable device that's been guiding travelers for centuries. The solution was the magnetic compass. This simple little tool, it works day or night, rain or shine, even when you can't see the sun or the stars. But how? What's the secret that makes that little needle point so steadily? To really get how a compass works, we've got to get a handle on the force that powers it. Magnetism. And it all starts with what magnets are and what they stick to. Okay, first things first, let's talk about the stuff magnets actually grab onto. They're only attracted to very specific materials, like iron, nickel, and cobalt. We call these magnetic materials. So think paper clips, steel pins, or, the door of your fridge. But on the other hand, most things around us just aren't interested. Your wooden desk, a plastic ruler, a glass cup, a magnet will have zero effect on them. These are what we call non-magnetic materials. So we know what magnets stick to, but here's where it gets really, really interesting. A magnet's power isn't the same all over. It's incredibly strong, but only in two very specific spots. Look at this. This is amazing. When you sprinkle tiny little iron filings over a bar magnet, they don't just cover it evenly. Nope. Instead, they create these beautiful, arching patterns that get super dense right at the two ends. This is basically a visual map of the magnet's invisible force field. These ends are called the magnetic poles. Every single magnet, doesn't matter what shape or size it is, has two of them, a north pole and a south pole. And this is where the magnetic force is at its absolute strongest. And here is the key rule. You can never, ever separate them. It's impossible. If you take a magnet and break it, you don't get a separate north piece and a south piece. Instead, each new piece instantly becomes its own little magnet, or the brand new north and south pole. And these two poles, well, they interact based on one simple, unbreakable law that explains everything. The rule is so simple, but it governs everything. Opposites attract and likes repel. A north pole will always pull toward a south pole, but it'll push another north pole away. This one principle, it's the secret behind everything from a simple compass to those futuristic maglev trains that float on an invisible magnetic cushion. All right, now we have the key. Let's see how this simple rule of attraction and repulsion can save Reshma's sailors from that storm. So here's the biggest secret of all. If you let a magnet just swing freely, it's always going to point in the same direction, north-south. Why? Because our entire planet is a giant magnet. Yep, deep inside, its molten iron core is spinning, generating this massive magnetic field with its own north and south pole. And this idea is so fundamental, you can actually prove it yourself at home. All you have to do is magnetize a regular old sewing needle just by stroking it with a magnet. Once you float that magnetized needle, it's going to line itself up with the Earth's magnetic field and point north. Bam! You've just made a compass. So now that we kind of get the science, we can start having some real fun with this invisible force. But, like with any tool, you gotta be a little careful. You can use a magnet's power to do what looks like straight-up magic. You can guide things through a maze without even touching them, or make toy cars mysteriously push each other away. It's all just that law of poles in action. But magnets, well, they're also surprisingly delicate. They lose their strength if they get too hot, if they're dropped or hammered. You can almost think of it as the magnet's personal plea. Hey, handle with care. To keep them strong, magnets need to be stored the right way. Bar magnets, for example, are kept in pairs with their opposite poles lined up. Then, these little pieces of soft iron called keepers are placed across the ends. This helps contain that magnetic field and keeps the magnets from getting weaker over time. So, from guiding ancient sailors across stormy seas to just sticking a shopping list to your fridge, magnetism is this fundamental, invisible force that's just woven into the fabric of our world. We've explored the science behind Rishva's story, but the real question is, now that you know the secret, what will you discover with it? Whether you're in your kitchen or we're talking about huge factories, we are constantly sorting and separating things. It might seem kind of basic, but there's some really fascinating science hidden in these everyday tasks. So let's dive in and uncover the methods we use to bring a little order to our mixed-up world. Come on, I am willing to bet you've done something just like this. You're about to eat, you see something you don't want, maybe it's a chili, maybe it's an olive, whatever, and you just pick it out. Well, that simple little move, that's the most basic form of separation, and it's the perfect place for us to start. But of course, it's not just about picking things out of our food. I mean, think about it. We separate tea leaves from tea, we get butter from milk, we separate seeds from cotton. We do it to get rid of stuff we don't want, sure, but also to get the useful stuff all by itself. Separation, it turns out, is a really big deal. It's fundamental to how we use pretty much everything. Okay, so let's start with the basics, the methods that are really intuitive, the ones that just rely on our own hands, our eyes, and, a little bit of muscle. This is like our beginner's toolkit for sorting the world. So this is what we're talking about, hand picking. It's absolutely perfect when the things you want to get rid of, like little stones or bits of dirt, are easy to spot and big enough to actually grab. It's super convenient, it works great, as long as you're not dealing with a mountain of the stuff. Right, exactly. Handpicking has its limits. Can you imagine trying to pick out tiny seeds from thousands of stalks of wheat? Or trying to separate a cup of salt that's been mixed with a cup of sand? No way. It would be impossible. So when the problem gets bigger, we need smarter, better techniques. And this is where we get a little more forceful. This is called threshing. It's basically the process of beating the heck out of stalks to shake the grain seeds loose. You just can't pluck them one by one, so farmers figured out, hey, let's just whack it. This can be done by hand, by using animals, or these days with massive machines. Okay, now this next one is just brilliant. It uses nature as a tool. It's called winnowing. So after you're done threshing, you've got this mix of heavy grain and really light husk. So what do? You let the mixture fall from up high, and the wind just carries the light husk away while the heavier grain falls straight down into a nice clean pile. So simple, but so smart. And this brings us perfectly to our next method, sieving. When you've got a mix of things that are different sizes, a sieve is your absolute best friend. The tiny, fine particles fall right through the holes, while the bigger stuff gets left behind. You see this everywhere, from sifting flour in the kitchen to separating pebbles from sand on a construction site. All right, let's move on to our next toolkit. Sometimes the stuff you're trying to get rid of is so fine that even a sieve won't work. For that, we turn to a very powerful, very common tool, good old water. Think about it. When you wash rice or lentils before you cook them, you're not just getting them wet. You are actually performing a separation. All those tiny little dust and soil particles are way too small to handpick or sieve out. But when you add water, something really clever happens. It's actually a cool two-step process. First up is sedimentation. You let the mixture sit for a second and the heavier rice grains all settle to the bottom. Then comes decantation. You just gently tilt the bowl and pour out the cloudy water, which carries all those lighter dust bits away with it. You know, you could try to decant your tea, right? Carefully pour the liquid off the tea leaves. But let's be real, you're probably going to get a few leaves in your cup. That is why filtration, using something like a tea strainer, is so much better. The little holes in the strainer let the tea through, but they stop the solid tea leaves cold. So far, we've separated solids from other solids and solids from liquids. But what about the trickiest challenge of all? How do you separate something that's completely dissolved into a liquid, something that's become totally invisible? Well, for that, we need to turn up the heat. This is the classic puzzle, isn't it? Once you dissolve salt in water, it's gone. You can't see it, you can't filter it out, and you definitely can't pick it out. The salt and water are a solution now. So how in the world do you get them apart? Out in the real world, this is how it's done on a massive scale. They collect seawater in these huge, shallow pits. Then the sun provides all the heat needed, and slowly but surely, all that water just disappears into the air, leaving something very valuable behind. And that process is called evaporation. By heating a solution, you can turn the liquid, in this case water, into a gas or vapor. But the solid that was dissolved in it, the salt, can't turn into a gas at that temperature, so it just gets left behind. And that is how we get salt from the sea. But wait a second, what if you wanted to keep the water too? Well, you can. If you capture that steam and cool it down, like by having it touch a cold lid, you can actually reverse the process. This is called condensation. The water vapor turns right back into pure liquid water, now completely separated from the salt. Okay, deep breath. We've learned about handpicking, sieving, decantation, filtration, evaporation, and condensation. We have a whole bunch of tools now, so let's see if we can combine them to solve a really tough separation problem. You ready for the final boss? And here it is, the ultimate challenge. A simple-looking mixture of sand and salt. You can't handpick them if the grains are the same size. A sieve is useless, and winnowing won't work. So how would you even begin to separate these two solids? Well, the trick is to use their different properties. First, you add water. The salt loves water. It dissolves. The sand, not so much. Step 2, you filter the whole concoction. The sand gets caught, leaving you with salty water. And we already know how to solve that. Step 3, you evaporate the water to get the salt back. And hey, if you want, you can even do step 4 and condense that steam to get pure water. Boom. A perfect multi-step separation. But hold on, there's a little mystery here. A character from our source material, Paheli, tried this exact same experiment. She followed all the steps, but when she was done,
she found that she had only recovered a tiny fraction of the salt she started with. So what could have possibly gone wrong?
And the answer, the reason it all went wrong for her, lies in this one key concept: a saturated solution. See, there's a limit to how much stuff you can dissolve in a liquid. Once you hit that limit, the solution is saturated. Any extra salt you add after that will just sink to the bottom. Paheli's problem was actually really simple. She didn't use enough water for the huge amount of salt she had. And what's really cool is that this limit isn't set in stone. If you heat up a saturated solution, you can actually dissolve even more stuff into it. This also explains why, water can dissolve a ton of sugar, but maybe not as much of something else. Different substances just have different limits.
Okay, so let's end with a final challenge for you. You're making lemonade. You want it to be really sweet, and you also want it to be ice cold. Knowing that temperature changes how much sugar can dissolve, should you add the sugar before you add the ice or after? The answer is right there in the science we just covered. Think about that next time you're in the kitchen, because the science of separation is absolutely everywhere.
Just take a second and look around you. I mean, really look. The screen you're watching this on, the chair you're sitting in, literally everything is built from something. But what is all this stuff, really? Well, today we're going to crack this secret code and finally understand what makes up our world. At first glance, this is just a random pile of things, right? A key, a ball, a ruler, a plant pot. They couldn't seem more different. But I promise you, there is a fundamental connection that ties every single one of these items together. So what is it? What's the secret thread linking these completely different objects? That's the exact mystery we're about to solve. To find that answer, we've got to start at the very beginning, with the absolute foundational building blocks of our physical world. And you know what? It all comes down to one simple word: material. A material is just any substance that's used to create an object. It's the paper in your book, the wood in your table, or the metal in that key we just saw. It's the what behind every single thing. Take Gulan and Sheeta Hair. They're pretty excited about their new school supplies. Gulan's notebook? It's made of paper. And Sheeta's pen? Well, that's made of plastic and metal. So you've got two different objects built from three totally distinct materials. Okay, so everything is made of materials, got it. But there are so many of them. How do we even begin to make sense of this endless variety of stuff that's all around us? Think back to that first picture with all the objects. If you had to sort them into groups, how would you even start? It just looks like a jumble of stuff at first. Luckily for us, we've got systems for this. You could group things by their shape. Put all the round objects in one pile, or you could sort them by color, or we can get a bit more scientific and group them by the material they're made of, or by a property they all share, like, say, whether or not they're shiny. And this whole process, it actually has a name: classification. It's how we bring order to the chaos of the world by arranging things into neat groups based on what they have in common. This is basically the foundation of how we study materials. Okay, so this brings us to the really cool part of our investigation. The secret code of any material is really just its set of properties. So let's decode a few of the most important ones, shall we? First up, luster. This one is all about how a material plays with light. On one side, we have lustrous or shiny materials, think metals like iron and gold, and on the other, we have non-lustrous materials like paper and wood that have more of a dull surface. But here's a little catch. You've heard the saying, all that glitters is not gold, right? Well, it's scientifically spot on. Just because something shines doesn't automatically mean it's a metal. Sometimes a dull material can be polished or coated to give it an artificial shine, which reminds us that just one property never tells the whole story. All right, so let's move from sight to touch. Our next property helps us understand what makes something feel hard or soft. Hardness isn't just an on or off switch, it's more like a spectrum. A material is considered soft if you can easily squish it or scratch it, kind of like a sponge. Somewhere in the middle, you have something like rubber, which is definitely harder than a sponge, but way softer than, say, iron or stone. Every material fits somewhere on this scale. So we can sort materials by how shiny they are or how hard they are. But so what? Why does any of this actually matter in the real world? Well, this is where it all comes together. Let's do a quick thought experiment. A tumbler is a cup for holding water, right? We know it can be made of glass, or plastic, or metal, but why not cloth? Just think about it for a second. Yeah, you probably guessed it. The answer is pretty obvious, isn't it?
Cloth isn't waterproof. The properties of that material are completely wrong for the job. You need a material that can actually hold liquid without it leaking all over the place.
And that brings us to the most important point of all. We choose a material specifically because its properties are a perfect match for the purpose of the object we want to make. You wouldn't make a hammer out of rubber or a window out of solid wood, right? The properties dictate the function. It's as simple as that. Now, this whole idea of choosing the right material for the right job, this is not new. In fact, it's one of the oldest forms of science and engineering in all of human history.
Just take a look at pottery in the Indian subcontinent. People were experimenting with clay as far back as 8,000 years ago. And over thousands of years, they perfected their craft, developing wheels and glazes and incredibly sophisticated baking methods, all throughout these amazing foundational civilizations. I mean, look at these. These are not just simple pots. They're the result of some seriously deep knowledge. Ancient artisans knew they had to carefully select and clean the perfect kind of clay, then fire it at exactly the right temperature to make it hard and durable. They were, for all intents and purposes, ancient material scientists.
And this wisdom was even written down in ancient texts. This Sanskrit verse from the Rasaratna Samuchaya clearly states that the materials for making a crucible, that's a vessel that can withstand super high temperatures, are clay and iron. They understood that the unique properties of those two materials were essential for the task. That's the exact same logic we use today. So, the secret code is out. Every single object you see was made from a material chosen specifically for its unique properties. The world isn't just a random collection of stuff. It's like a library of purpose-built materials. So now that you know how to read the code, what are you going to notice about the world around you?
We feel temperature pretty much every second of every day, right? But what if I told you that your own sense of hot and cold is, well, kind of wrong? You know that feeling of a cool breeze or a warm mug? Turns out it's more of a suggestion than a hard fact. Today, we're going to find out why and uncover the real story behind what we feel. Do you have a fever? It's like the first question we always ask when someone's feeling under the weather. And what do? We instinctively reach out and touch their forehead, completely trusting our own hands to tell us the truth. But should we? And this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Fibon did exactly what we all do. She used her hand. It felt warm, so she figured her brother Lambok had a fever. But, luckily she didn't just stop there. It really makes you wonder, how reliable is that forehead test we've all been using our entire lives?
So let's actually dig into that exact point. Are our hands really reliable tools for measuring temperature? Or are they just super easily fooled? Okay, let's put this to the test with a really simple experiment that you can do at home right now. I promise this is going to completely change how you think about hot and cold. You ready? All right, step 1. You're going to need 3 bowls. In the first one, put some warm water. In the last one, get some ice-cold water. Now stick one hand in the warm and the other in the cold. Just keep them there for about a minute. Let your hands really get used to their new normal.
And now for the moment of truth. Take both hands out and plunge them at the exact same time into that middle bowl of regular room temperature tap water. Now remember, both hands are in the exact same water, feeling the exact same temperature. So what happens? Well, your brain gets totally confused. The hand that was in the warm water is now screaming, "Whoa, this is cold," while the hand from the ice water is shouting, "Ah, this feels warm." How can the same water be both hot and cold at the same time? It can't. It's a paradox, and it proves that our senses don't measure absolute temperature. They only measure the change in temperature.
And this really lands us on the core issue here. Our sense of touch isn't a thermometer at all. It's more like a comparison tool. It is simply not reliable for getting an objective measurement. It's all relative. So this leads us to a pretty logical problem, right? If our built-in system is this flawed, what can we trust to give us the real story? How do we get a measurement that's actually true for everyone, no matter if their hands were just in a bucket of ice? Okay, so since our hands clearly can't be trusted, we need a tool that isn't biased by what it just felt a minute ago. We need an objective standard. And you guessed it, that's where the thermometer comes in.
The answer is temperature. See, it's not a feeling. It's a hard number. It is a reliable, objective measure of how hot or cold something is. No confusion, no relativity, just data.
And the real hero of this story is the thermometer.
Unlike our hands, it's not influenced by what it was doing before. It uses sensors to detect the actual energy of molecules. That's the true measure of heat. And it gives us a precise, objective number.
Now, of course, a great tool is only useful if you use it the right way. To get an accurate reading, it's really simple. Wash the tip, reset it, place it under your tongue, and just wait for that little beep. It's simple, it's hygienic, and most importantly, it's accurate.
And just a few key things to remember to protect our trusty tool. Always wash it, keep the display part dry, and always handle it by the body, never by that sensitive tip. This just makes sure the measurement you get is one you can actually rely on.
Okay, so we've got our reliable tool, and I'm pretty sure most of us have heard that magic number for a normal human body temperature. But what does that number actually represent?
37 degrees Celsius. We all know that number. It's like the universal benchmark for a healthy person. If you're at 37, you're good. If not, something's up, right?
Well, it's not quite that simple. Is that number an absolute unbreakable rule? Or is normal just a little more complicated than we've been led to believe? So here's the key insight. 37 degrees isn't some magic number. It's the average temperature taken from a huge group of healthy people. Your personal normal might actually be slightly different, and it can even change throughout the day depending on your age and what you're doing.
All right, now that we've kind of decoded Celsius, let's talk about the other languages of heat, because temperature is universal, but we use a few different scales to talk about it around the world.
There are really three main players. You've got Celsius, which is the global standard for most things. Then there's Fahrenheit, which is still used daily in the United States. And finally, there's Kelvin, which is basically the language of science. It's the official unit for temperature in scientific work. So that normal average body temperature we were just talking about, in Celsius, it's 37.0 degrees. But in Fahrenheit, it's 98.6 degrees. It's the exact same amount of heat, just two totally different ways of saying it. And, you know, our tools are constantly evolving. We went from mercury to digital, and now to these non-contact infrared thermometers. These things were absolutely crucial during the pandemic, giving us a way to get that vital, accurate measurement safely from a distance. And this all boils down to one crucial point. Accuracy is everything. The physicist Anna Mani said it best. Wrong measurements are worse than no measurements at all. Just think about that for a second. A bad measurement doesn't just leave you in the dark. It actively leads you in the wrong direction. And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. We've just seen how incredibly easy it is to trick our basic perception of hot and cold. It really makes you wonder, if we can't even trust our own hands on something so fundamental, what other assumptions, what other feelings might be leading us astray? What else do we need a better tool to truly measure?
Have you ever stopped to wonder if ice and water are really, different things? Or where a puddle actually goes after it rains? Or, how about this one? How a cold glass of water gets all sweaty on a hot day like it's magic. Well, today, we're going to be detectives and uncover some of water's biggest secrets, secrets that are hiding in plain sight. So let's jump right in and start the investigation.
And hey, we're not doing this alone. Let's meet Avi and Thirav. These two are our guides for today. They are super curious about everything, and just like us, they've got some big questions they're trying to figure out. They'll help us piece together all the clues. So, our first mystery, it all starts on a sunny afternoon. Avi and Thirav are kicking back with some lemonade, and they notice the ice cubes clinking around in the glass. A totally normal scene. But for them, this simple thing sparks a huge debate, and our very first puzzle. So here's the question they're arguing about. Are ice and water two totally different substances? Thirav looks at the solid ice, then at the liquid lemonade, and he's convinced they have to be. But Avi's not so sure. What do you think? At first glance, it kind of seems obvious, doesn't it? One is hard and solid, the other one flows. Let's take a closer look. If you just trust your senses, they feel completely different. You can literally pick up an ice cube, right? It's a solid thing you can hold. But water? Nope, it just flows right through your fingers, it splashes. So based on that evidence alone, you can totally see why you'd think they're two separate things. But here is the big reveal. They aren't different substances at all. They are just two different states of the exact same thing. It's all just water. Ice is simply the solid state of water, and what we call water is its liquid state. Think of it like it's all H2O, just wearing a different outfit. And with that, mystery number one is solved. Okay. Let's move on to our next case.
After a morning rain shower, Avi and Thirif spot puddles all over the place. But by the evening, poof, some of them are just gone. Avi's guess is that the water just soaked into the ground. But is that really the whole story? To test that idea, they do a really simple experiment. They take a spoonful of water and put it on a solid steel plate and just watch what happens. And you know what? The water still disappears. But obviously, it can't soak through solid steel. So if it's not being absorbed, where in the world is it going? The answer has a fancy scientific name: evaporation. That liquid water, whether it's on the plates or in a puddle, is slowly turning into an invisible gas called water vapor. It then just mixes into the air. So it's not really disappearing. It's just performing a little magic trick and changing into its third state, a gas. And you know what's cool? This evaporation thing is happening all around us, all the time. Think about it. When your wet clothes dry on a clothesline, that's evaporation. A mopped floor that dries all by itself? Yep, evaporation. Even when you put on hand sanitizer and it just vanishes as you rub your hands, that's evaporation too. It's this constant, invisible process that's always going on. All right, it's time for our final mystery. And honestly, this one might be the most confusing one of all. Avi and Trav are making some more lemonade, but this time it's extra icy. They set the glass down, and after a couple of minutes, they notice something really strange happening on the outside of the glass. Take a look at this. These little water droplets have shown up all over the outside of the glass, making it look like the glass is sweating. So where is this water coming from? Could it have leaked through the glass? Well, Avi and Thurav have a couple of theories about that. Okay, so this is Avi's first guess. And it makes sense, right? Maybe there are teeny tiny invisible holes in the glass and some of the water is just seeping out. It's a really common idea, but is it actually what's happening? But Thurav has a fantastic counterargument. He points out that if water were leaking out of the glass, then the water level inside the glass should be going down. But when they look closely, it hasn't dropped at all. So that tells them the water has to be coming from somewhere else. And that somewhere else is the air all around us. This process is called condensation. Remember that invisible water vapor we talked about in our last mystery? Well, when that warm, invisible gas in the air touches the super cold surface of the glass, it cools down really fast and turns back into tiny liquid water droplets. It's like magic, but it's science. And we can actually prove it, which is so cool. If you take a glass of ice water and put it on a really sensitive digital scale, you'll see that its weight actually increases over time. That extra weight is the water from the air that's collecting on the outside of the glass. So it's not leaking out, water is being added to it from the atmosphere. Case closed. So we've solved 3 different mysteries today, but they all connect to tell one incredible story: the never-ending journey of water. Let's put all the clues together and see the big picture. So here it is, all laid out. Water basically has 3 different identities, or states. You've got ice, which is the solid. You've got water, which is the liquid. And then you have water vapor, the invisible gas. They all have different properties, but deep down, it's all the same stuff, just in a different costume. And the most amazing part of all this is that water is always shifting between these states. It freezes into ice, it melts back into liquid, it evaporates into a vapor, and then it condenses back into a liquid. It's this beautiful, continuous cycle that's happening right now, all around you. So now that you're armed with all this new knowledge, I've got one last question for you. Think like a detective. As you go about the rest of your day-to-day, where are you going to spot evaporation and condensation in action? I promise you, the clues are everywhere, just waiting for you to find them. So let's jump right into one of the biggest, most fundamental questions there is. What does it actually mean for something to be alive? You know, it seems pretty simple on the surface, right? We think we know life when we see it. But as we're about to find out, this whole mystery is way deeper and honestly, a lot more fascinating than you might think. Our whole investigation really kicks off with this moment of pure childhood curiosity. You've got a couple of kids who find a snail shell, and they're told, hey, don't touch that, because a living snail might be inside. And this sparked a really brilliant question. How could something that looks totally still, like a tiny rock, actually be home to a living, breathing creature? And that's really the core question for us today. When you look out at the world, where exactly do you draw that line? Where does the non-living end and the living begin? This is the mystery we're going to try to solve together. Okay, section 1.
A shell of a question. This whole puzzle about the snail shell, it seems small, but it points to a much bigger idea. That line between living and not living, it isn't always some sharp, obvious boundary. Sometimes life is hiding in plain sight. So, section 2 is the movement test. Where do we even start with this? Well, let's begin with the most obvious clue. If something is moving around on its own, it has to be alive, right? We can call this the movement test. But, how reliable is it really? And right away, our simple test gets a little complicated. I mean, look at a pigeon. It flies, it walks, it breathes. We all agree a pigeon is alive. But then you have a car. A car definitely moves down the road, but nobody would ever say a car is alive. It doesn't breathe, it doesn't grow. So the big point here is that movement, all by itself, is just not a reliable sign of life. Which, of course, leads us to the other side of the coin. If things that move aren't always alive, what about things that are alive but don't seem to move at all? I'm talking, of course, about plants. They're just sitting there, rooted to the spot, but we all know they're living things. But wait, here's a cool twist. It turns out some plants do move, just in these really subtle and incredible ways. Take the Drosera plant. It's an insect eater. When some unlucky bug lands on its leaves, these sticky little hairs slowly curl inwards to trap it for a meal. It's slow for sure, but that is definitely movement, a clear sign of life in action. And here's an even faster example, the touch-me-not plant. If you just gently brush against its leaves, they snap shut, folding up almost instantly. It's this clear, rapid movement. This just goes to show that our definition of life has to be way broader than just being able to walk or fly around. Okay, on to section 3, the 7 signs of life. So to really solve this mystery properly, we need to go beyond just one clue like movement. What we really need is a detective's checklist, a set of rules that all living things follow. And luckily for us, scientists have already made one. And here it is, the official checklist for life. There are 7 key signs. All living things show movement of some kind. They grow, they need nutrition, they respire, they excrete waste, they respond to their environment, and they reproduce. If something can tick all 7 of these boxes, then scientists will classify it as alive. Let's just take growth for a second. This one's pretty obvious, right? A child grows from a baby into a kid. You can't wear the same shoes you wore 2 years ago. A car, on the other hand, is going to stay the exact same size forever. It just doesn't grow. Then you've got all these internal processes that are constantly running to keep life going. Living things need nutrition, that's food, to get energy. They perform respiration, which is basically breathing in some form, to unlock that energy from the food. And then they have to get rid of all the leftover waste, and that's called excretion. It's kind of like a factory, you know? You put fuel in, you burn it for power, and you have to take out the trash. All living things also respond to what's happening around them. The technical word for something that makes you react is a stimulus. So if you touch a hot pan by accident, you pull your hand away instantly. That heat is the stimulus, and pulling your hand back is the response. Even that touch-me-not plant folding its leaves, that's a response to the stimulus of touch. All right, on to section 4, the case of the seed. So now we have our trusty 7-point checklist. We should be able to identify anything now, no problem. Well, let's put our list to the ultimate test with our final and probably most challenging case, the humble seed. Seriously, think about a dry bean seed. Does it move? Nope. Does it eat or breathe? Not that you can see. It doesn't look like it's doing anything on our checklist. Just by looking at it, it seems as non-living as a little pebble. So, did our checklist just fail? Well, when simple observation lets us down, we turn to the scientific method. To really find out the truth about this seed, we can run a simple experiment to see if maybe, just maybe, the right conditions can coax those signs of life out into the open. So here's how the experiment works. We test a bunch of different conditions. We take 4 pots, and each one has a bean seed in it. Pot A gets sunlight but 0 water. Pot B gets sunlight and way too much water. Pot C gets just the right amount of water, but we keep it in the dark. And finally, Pot D gets the best of both worlds, sun and the perfect amount of water. So what do you think is going to happen? And the results are in. The seeds that got no water, nothing happened. The seeds that were basically drowned in too much water also failed. probably because they couldn't get enough air. But look at pots C and D. With the right amount of water, these seeds germinated and started to grow. And here's the really wild part. Sunlight wasn't even needed to get the whole process started.
Now for our fifth and final section, life is potential. This little experiment gives us the last, most critical clue we need to solve the mystery of life once and for all. It's about to change how we think about our entire checklist. So the answer is a definite, resounding yes. The seed is alive. Sure, it wasn't showing any of the 7 signs when it was all dry and dormant, but the second it got the right conditions, a little water and air, boom, it started to grow. It had the potential for life locked inside of it the entire time. And that right there is the biggest takeaway from our whole investigation. Being alive isn't always about what you are actively doing in the moment. It's not just about moving or eating. Sometimes being alive is about what you could do. It's about having the complete instruction manual for life inside you, just waiting for the right moment to get started. So the next time you see a dormant seed, or a snail tucked away in its shell, or even a tree in the middle of winter, just remember what we talked about. Life isn't always about action. Sometimes it's just about potential. It makes you wonder, what else in the world around you is just waiting for its moment to spring into life? Thanks for joining me on this one. When you think of treasure, what comes to mind? Probably gold, right? Or jewels. But what if the most valuable things on Earth aren't rare at all? What if they're so common, so all around us that we kind of forget they're even there? Today, we're going to uncover some of those essential, overlooked treasures of nature that make all life possible. So, let's set the scene. Our story kicks off in a village where 2 kids, Bhumi and Surya, are visiting their grandmother, Aji. Surrounded by all that fresh air and those green hills, you can just feel it, right? It's the perfect place to disconnect from the city and get back to what really matters. After pointing out the clean air, the rich soil, the warm sunlight, Aji asked them this really simple but, wow, pretty profound question. And that question is really the heart of our explainer today. What are the fundamental treasures our lives truly depend on? Okay, first up is the most immediate and, well, invisible treasure of all, the air we breathe. It's totally automatic, right? Something we do nearly 20,000 times a day without giving it a single thought. You know, when Aji teaches the children those breathing exercises, she's connecting them with a fundamental biological truth. Think about it. We can survive for weeks without food, and even days without water, but we only have a few precious minutes without air. It's this constant, non-negotiable need for our bodies to function, second by second. It just feels like empty space, doesn't it? But the air all around us is actually a super dynamic and complex mixture of gases. So let's break it down. What's really in every single breath we take? This chart shows the cocktail of gases we call air perfectly. Now, the vast majority, a whopping 78%, is nitrogen. It's mostly inert, kind of just hanging out, acting as a crucial buffer gas that dilutes the oxygen and makes our atmosphere stable and breathable. Then comes that 21% of oxygen we absolutely need to live. And that tiny 1%, well, that's a little mix of argon, carbon dioxide, and a few other trace gases. Let's just focus on that number for a second. 21%. It doesn't sound like a lot, does it? And yet this relatively small fraction of our atmosphere is the high-octane fuel for pretty much all complex life on Earth, from the tiniest insect to the biggest whale. That 21% makes everything possible. Our metabolism, our movement, even our thoughts. But air isn't just for breathing. When it moves, it becomes this powerful force that we can actually harness. This moving air, a treasure born from that first treasure, has a name we all know: wind. The definition is so simple. Wind is just air in motion. We feel it as a gentle breeze on our skin. But as Bhumi and Surya learn, that motion is pure kinetic energy, and we can do a lot more than just feel it. We can capture it and put it to work. You've probably made a pinwheel or a furky just like this before. It's such a perfect hands-on way to see energy conversion. As you run, the moving air pushes against those angled blades, and it converts the linear motion of the wind into the rotational motion of the wheel. It's basically physics in the palm of your hand. And this is a fantastic aha moment. On the left, a simple toy. On the right, a massive wind turbine. I mean, they look completely different, but the aerodynamic principle is exactly the same. The same force that spins a paper toy can also turn the giant blades that power our cities. How cool is that? And this simple principle has powered human innovation for centuries. Windmills have ground our grains and pumped our water, doing the heavy lifting of civilization. Today, these massive wind farms use that same ancient idea to generate clean, renewable electricity for millions and millions of people. Okay, so from the invisible force of air, we now turn to a treasure we can see and feel, but one we just as often take for granted. It is the solvent of life itself, water.
Here, Aji isn't just teaching the kids to water plants. She's teaching them a deeper philosophy of conservation, a mindset where not a single drop is wasted. She's showing them that because water enables life, every single drop is precious.
And just think about how deeply it's woven into our world. We drink it to survive, of course, but it also regulates the planet's temperature, carves the very landscapes we live in, and grows the food that fuels our societies. I mean, nearly every single process, from manufacturing the device you're watching this on to the metabolic reactions in your own cells, depends on this simple, miraculous molecule. So, we've looked at air, wind, and water as individual treasures. But what's the bigger picture here? What is the core lesson that Aji is trying to pass on, the one big insight that connects everything? This is it. This is the heart of the entire journey. Air, water, soil, sunlight, these aren't just convenient resources for us to use. They are the absolute, non-negotiable foundation of all existence. Without them, life as we know it simply would not be possible. And that leads to this final, powerful realization. We often talk about going out into nature as if it's some separate place we can visit. But we're not just visitors. We are an inseparable part of it, completely dependent on its systems and its treasures for our own survival. So I'll leave you with the same challenge Aji gave the children. We've talked about air and water, but what other treasures do we overlook? The soil beneath our feet? The sunlight that powers our planet? The next time you step outside, take a breath and just ask yourself, what essential treasure am I forgetting to see?
You know, it's kind of funny when you think about it. How do we all just agree on how big something is? How do we know that a meter here is the exact same as a meter halfway across the world? Well, we're going to unravel that whole mystery with a simple story that actually solves a massive universal puzzle.
So let's meet Deepa. Our journey begins with her and a problem I think we've all had at some point. Yep, she's grown over the year, and her school uniform just doesn't fit anymore. And this super simple, everyday issue is about to kick off a really big discovery. So when her mother takes her to get a new uniform, Deepa starts to notice something odd. The shopkeeper uses this long, stiff metal rod. The tailor, on the other hand, uses a flexible tape measure. And then her own mother suggests adding a length of char angula, which is basically the width of 4 fingers. Deepa's thinking, wait a second, 3 different jobs, 3 totally different rulers. It really got her thinking.
Back at school, Deepa tells her friends all about her confusion. And you know how it goes. This one little question about different rulers gets everybody curious. It leads them to a brilliant idea. Let's do an experiment. And they're going to use the most ordinary object they can find, their classroom table.
Her friends totally get it. They realize this is how people have measured things for, ever. A grandmother might measure cloth with the length of her arm, a farmer might pace out a field using his strides, and Deepa's mom measures things with her handspan, which is called a ballast. It's personal, it's convenient, but, as they're about to find out, it has one major flaw.
Okay, so the plan is set. The friends all gather around the table, ready to test this all out. Their tool for the day? Super simple, their own hands. The goal? To find one single consistent measurement for the table and handspans. Sounds easy, right?
So they all get to work, carefully placing one hand after the other along the edge of the table. But when they all share their results, it's complete chaos. The numbers just don't match up. I mean, they're not even close.
The results are in, and you can see the problem right here in black and white. Anish gets a little over 13 handspans. Padma gets exactly 13. And Hardeep gets a full 14. So, who's right? How long is the table really? This is the exact question Hardeep asks, and it's the absolute core of the whole puzzle. If they all measured the exact same table, how on earth could they all get different answers? And the answer, when it finally clicks, is incredibly simple. It's one of those of course moments.
Tasneem is the first one to guess it. Their hands aren't the same size. Anish has bigger hands than Padma, and Hardeep's are a bit smaller. Their ruler was literally changing with every single person who used it.
And that's it. That's Deepa's big light bulb moment. No wonder people use scales and measuring tapes, she realizes. Their so-called failed experiment actually proved something huge. It showed why we all need something better, a universal ruler that's the same for everyone, everywhere.
And this leads us to the big solution, the idea of a standard unit. A standard unit is just a measurement that has a fixed, unchanging value. It doesn't matter if you're tall or short, or if you're in one country or another, it is always the same.
And this picture just nails the difference perfectly. On one side, you have a handspan. It can be any size. But on the other, you have a ruler. That little mark for 1 centimeter is always 1 centimeter. It's reliable, it's standard.
Now, to solve this problem on a global scale, pretty much all the countries in the world agreed on a single system, the International System of Units, or SI for short. And for length, the main unit we all agree to use is the meter.
And the meter is part of this really neat family that's super logical. For really long distances, we use kilometers. For everyday objects, we use centimeters. And for teeny tiny things, we use millimeters. It's all connected, which makes it incredibly easy to use. But here's the thing. Even with a standard system, you still got to use the right tool for the job. You wouldn't try to measure around a big curved tree trunk with a stiff ruler, would you? Of course not. You'd grab a flexible tape measure. The unit is standard, but the tool has to fit the task. And of course, using that tool correctly is absolutely key. So first, make sure the scale is placed flat, right up against the object. Second, position your eye directly above the measurement mark. Looking from an angle can throw your reading off. And hey, here's a pro tip. If the end of your ruler is broken and the 0 is gone, just start measuring from the 1 centimeter mark, and then remember to subtract 1 from your final number. Simple. So the friends have totally solved the puzzle of length. But their curiosity is just getting started. Their next big adventure in measurement begins with a brand new question, one that shifts their thinking from how long something is to where it is.
A teacher announces a field trip to a local garden, and immediately the friends start debating. Is the garden closer to us, or is the school farther away? Tasneem and Padma are totally sure the garden is closer, but Deepa and Anish are positive the school is. So, who's right?
Well, it turns out they all are. How's that possible? Because they were all measuring the distance from their own different houses. The answer to where something is, or how far away it is totally meaningless unless you have a common starting point.
And this brings us to another super important idea, the reference point. It's just a fixed object or a spot that everyone agrees to measure from. Without it, describing a position is just a guessing game. The reference point is what gives location its context. Here is a perfect real-world example. Padma is on a bus and she sees one of those kilometer stones on the side of the road. It says Delhi 70 kilometers. In this case, the city of Delhi is that fixed reference point, and her current position is exactly 70 kilometers away from it. A little while later, she sees another stone. Now this one says Delhi 60 kilometers. The reference point, Delhi, hasn't moved, right? But her position relative to it has changed. She's now 10 kilometers closer.
And that simple observation actually gives us our final, really elegant definition. What is motion? Well, an object is in motion if its position changes over time with respect to a reference point. See? It beautifully connects distance, time, and position all in one go.
So a standard unit lets us agree on length, and a reference point helps us agree on position. But here's a final thought to chew on. We use fixed points as references, right? Like a city or a bus stop. But what happens when your reference point is also moving? Like another car on the highway. How do you measure motion then? Now that is a puzzle for another day.
You know, have you ever just stopped and looked up at the night sky? It's this view that's totally captivated us for like forever. It's a source of wonder, of stories, of science. So today, we're going to give you a kind of user's guide to that incredible expanse up there. So let's start our journey somewhere really special, Nubra in Ladakh. Picture this. The air is crystal clear. City lights are nowhere to be found. And we meet these twins, Youngdol and Dorje. They're looking up, and they just feel this incredible sense of awe. I mean, for them, the sky is this giant, brilliant canvas, just splashed with thousands and thousands of stars. And that feeling they're having, that's something we can all relate to, right? It's this universal human thing, a sky just full of wonder. So what's the first thing we do when we see all those scattered points of light? Well, we try to make sense of it all. Our brains are just hardwired for it. We can't help but look for patterns, connect the dots, and try to see something familiar, like an animal or a hero, maybe just a household object. I mean, really, think about it. Have you ever done that? Just laid back on a clear night, looked up, and started tracing these imaginary lines between the stars, trying to make a picture? It's basically this giant cosmic game of connect the dots that people have been playing for thousands of years. And believe it or not, that simple creative act, that's exactly how we first started to map the heavens. So let's dive into how we all started connecting those starry dots. Okay, so take a look here. At first glance, it's just a random jumble of stars, right? But if you look long enough, what do you start to see? Maybe something like a big spoon? Or a hunter with a bow? Maybe even a dog? For thousands of years, people all over the world have looked at these exact same stars and have come up with their own patterns, their own stories. And bam, this is exactly how those patterns started to take shape. See? There's Orion, the mighty hunter, and right behind him is his loyal dog, Canis Major. And these weren't just doodles in the sky, no way. They were our very first maps of the universe, all born from pure imagination. So we call these patterns constellations. Now, you probably think of a constellation as the connect the dots picture itself, right? Like Orion's belt. But today, the official definition is a little different. It's actually more like a boundary line on a map. A constellation is now a whole region of the sky. So, how many of these regions are there? Well, back in the early 1900s, the International Astronomical Union got together and officially carved up the entire sky into exactly 88 constellations. That's it. Every single star up there belongs to one of those 88 patches of sky. But here's the thing. These star maps weren't just for telling cool stories. For ancient people, they were an absolutely critical tool for survival. You could even say they were the original GPS. And this is such a cool comparison. I mean, look, on one side you have an ancient caravan, maybe just like the ones the twins back in Nubra heard stories about, finding their way using nothing but the stars. And on the other side, the map app on your phone. It's the exact same need. Where am I going? Just answered with totally different technology. Yeah, way before we had magnetic compasses, sailors out on the huge empty ocean and travelers in the middle of a desert, they counted on the stars. Stars like the pole star were amazing because they barely move in the northern sky. It was like a fixed point, a celestial anchor in the sky that could guide them home safe. Okay, so how can you tap into this ancient skill today? Well, you're in luck. Let's get into your very own guide to stargazing. All right, rule number 1, and this is a big one. You've got to get away from the city. That constant glow from streetlights and buildings, we call it light pollution. It just washes everything out. You can only see the very brightest stars. If you really want to see the sky like our ancestors did, you have to find a genuinely dark spot. Okay, here's your simple 4-step plan. Step 1, escape those city lights. Step 2, let your eyes adjust. Seriously, give it a good 30 minutes for your night vision to kick in. It's super important. Step 3, figure out your directions, find north. And finally, step 4, you're ready to start connecting the dots. Need a good place to start? Easy. Look for the Big Dipper. Find the 2 stars at the edge of its cup and just follow them in a straight line. They're like cosmic arrows pointing right to the pole star. Or here's another one. Find the 3 stars in a perfect row that make up Orion's belt. Follow that line down and to the east, and boom, you'll land right on Sirius, the brightest star in the whole night sky. Finding these landmarks for yourself, it's an amazing feeling. But it also makes you think, what are we really looking at up there? So let's zoom way, way out and think about our actual place in the cosmos. Okay, here's a question. We all know our sun is a star, right? So why does it look like a giant, blindingly bright ball, while every other star is just a tiny little pinprick of light? It sounds like a simple question, but the answer is, honestly, it's mind-bending. To even start to wrap our heads around this, we need a new ruler. It's called the astronomical unit, or AU for short. 1 AU is just the distance from us, here on Earth, to the Sun. That's about 150 million kilometers. So we are exactly 1 AU away from our home star.
Okay, got that? 1 AU. Now, get ready for this. The very next closest star, a little guy called Proxima Centauri, is 269,000 astronomical units away. That is not a typo. 269,000 times further away than our sun. The scale is just... it's staggering. It's almost impossible to imagine.
So there's your answer. Our sun isn't special because it's the biggest or the brightest star out there. Not by a long shot. Lots of them are way bigger. It only seems like the king of the sky because it's literally our next-door neighbor in the cosmos. Every other star is just so incredibly far away that they shrink down to nothing more than those little pinpricks of light.
So, next time you look up at the night sky, remember you're looking at this huge, ancient storybook. It's got 88 official chapters, and they're filled with endless stories of science, myth, and human adventure. The only question left is, which chapter will you read first?